Hi everyone. A few weeks back, I decided to get into the Halloween spirit by taking a quick day trip to visit the home of Washington Irving. If you're not familiar with him, he is the 19th century American writer who's famous for writing short stories. Among them is the legend of Sleepy Hollow. Even if you've never read the story itself, many are familiar with the name Sleepy Hollow or the Headless Horseman. The story revolves around Ichabod Crane, a superstitious schoolmaster who, after leaving the party of the wealthy Van Tassel family one night, whose daughter, Katrina, Ichabod had been hoping to marry, encounters the horseman. After racing across the bridge by the cemetery, the horseman gets onto the bridge, rears his horse, and throws his head at Ichabod, or what he believes is the horseman's head. Ichabod then mysteriously disappears and is never heard from again. The ending is up to interpretation. Irving actually wrote The Legend of Sleepy Hollow while he was living abroad in Europe. Stories that include Headless Horsemen have been around since the Middle Ages. Irish folklore, Scottish, German. I think there's a few stories about Headless Horsemen in the Brothers Grimm. And of course, in English literature, we have Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, where there's this man who's literally green, gets decapitated and then just stands up and picks up his head. So it is highly probable that Irving was inspired by these stories. But the story itself takes place in a real location. At the time when Irving wrote the story, Tarrytown was still a predominantly Dutch settlement, and in that settlement they had a small little valley within the town itself that the local inhabitants called Sleepy Hollow. And what some people may not be aware of is that it's still in existence and you can visit it to this very day. Tarrytown is located around roughly 30 miles north of New York City. It's in the lower Hudson Valley region. Now, Washington Irving loved this area so much that he purchased his own home called Sunnyside around that area, a few miles south of Tarrytown. And so I thought it would be a really nice Halloween treat to go and visit. You can drive there, but another easy way is by taking a train at Grand Central Station. Irving himself wasn't particularly fond of these railroads. More on that later. You can purchase your ticket using the vending machines, but I personally like the old-fashionedness of getting them from the ticket booth, also to make sure I get on the right train. Irving spent a lot of his youth traveling the Hudson Valley area, so it's not really surprising that his writings were inspired by it. Some of them were influenced by the customs and folktales of the Dutch descendants that still inhabited the area at the time. Influence is visible in stories like Rip Van Winkle, and of course, the legend of Sleepy Hollow.
This is actually my first time in Irvington. I have been to Tarrytown before, which is the town in between Sleepy Hollow, which is to the north, and Irvington, which is to the south. Irvington, or Washington Irving's home is in Irvington itself. I'm pretty sure that's why they named it after him. I've actually never been there. I have to say it's really nice, and they actually have a lot of very, very beautiful kind of houses. These look a lot more modern, but they do have a lot of old houses, I think, that date back to the time that this area was fully colonized by the Dutch. So they have, like, I think Van Cortlandt Manor and Philipsburg, I think, is one, and Lyndhurst, I think, is another. And there are these huge properties with this big expanse of lands and stuff that they used to farm. The whole area is very kind of woodsy and very nice. I could see at night that even to this day, this whole area would be a little intimidating. Okay, so this is Lyndhurst, which I mentioned before, but I just looked on my map and it's actually further north, so I definitely walked a little too far. So now I have to go back. You know what? This is okay, because I think I learned a very valuable lesson here, and that is, if you have a map via Google or a hand map, use it.
After getting back on track and wondering if I found Pennywise's domain, I made it to Sunnyside. The home is now a museum and accessible certain times of the year. I later learned it's preserved by the historic Hudson Valley, which also maintains some of the other estates I mentioned earlier. As I purchased my ticket, I was informed that I couldn't take pictures inside the house, but the exterior and grounds were perfectly fine. While waiting to go in, I confirmed that the town Irvington was indeed named after Irving in his honor. Financially, he did very well in his life. His home included an outhouse, a dairy room, a firewood storage, and an ice storage, which they actually did call a refrigerator in those days. The house combines European and colonial New York architecture, which reflects Irving's storytelling personality. He originally had private access to the Hudson, that is, until the government decided to build a railroad there. It was one of the first cases of eminent domain in the US, confiscating private property for public use if it benefits the citizens. Needless to say, Irving was never happy with this arrangement. Afterwards, you can get some memorabilia at the local gift shop, maybe take some funny pictures with friends, or simply explore the grounds, which are pretty extensive and absolutely gorgeous during the autumn season.
Okay. That was a little tricky. Actually, I don't think I was supposed to come this way. How do I get out? Oh, okay. Hold on. Ooh. I probably wasn't supposed to do that, guys. If you come here, don't do what I did.
I still had some time before my train, so I decided to walk through Tarrytown to Sleepy Hollow to see the Sleepy Hollow sign and their Headless Horseman sculpture, when, as luck would have it, I happened to find the town preparing for their annual Halloween party.
This whole kind of like small town charm and Halloween and kids dressed up actually reminds me of the whole scene in E.T. Where I think it's Halloween. This whole place gives off a very, very similar vibe. I mean, I can imagine for these three towns, Irvington, Tarrytown, and Sleepy Hollow, I think Halloween has an extra special meaning. I don't know, I can't kind of get over it. I don't know, growing up in New York City, which is honestly only about 45 minutes away, it's just, you don't get this kind of small town feeling. I mean, we have parades and kids dress up in Halloween, but it's never quite like this. So it's actually really fascinating to just walk these streets and just see the community just kind of mingle and interact.
After a long day of sightseeing, I decided to stick around Sleepy Hollow and Tarrytown to join in the festivities. A new experience, but definitely a fun one.